If you grew up playing games in the 1990s or 2000s, you almost definitely have a fond childhood memory associated with the Tony Hawk series. They're very memorable games with their infectious soundtracks, wacky sense of humor, attitude, and just fundamentally addicting gameplay. Even if you haven't played the game, you at least know the name because of its immense cultural impact on gaming and on skateboarding. But despite that, these games are woefully inaccessible nowadays. Total abandonware. Console versions were never re-released on modern platforms, and unlike a lot of old games, you won't find them on PC stores like Steam, probably because of issues with licensing their soundtracks. To play any of them nowadays, you'll need your own physical copy in one of their native consoles, which are hard to find for cheap. You could pirate a copy and emulate it, or for the best experience, download a PC port, run some wacky installer, and patch in a mod just to fix all the glitches and make it run in a resolution that isn't Nintendo 3DS. And if that wasn't deterrent enough, chances are if you've never played a Tony Hawk game before, you'll have a tough time trying to figure it out when the majority of them have no tutorial. This series came from an age when we still had to use manuals. No, like instruction manuals. All this results in a series that everyone loves, but nobody seems to talk about unless it's in the past tense. Those games were great. I played them all the time. You might boot one up for old time's sake or check out the passionate modding community, but Pro Skater's zeitgeist has long passed, and newer skateboarding games are out there to give you your fix now. What even happened to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater anyway? Why don't they just make more games, some people might be asking? Well, in 2020, we got our wish. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, a brand new game that revived all the old love for this franchise in a lot of people's eyes. But 4 years on from its release, I am really sad about how it all turned out, and it's painful to think about how it could have gone differently. So am I just here to whine and complain about another lazy, rushed out cash grab of a remake? No, I'm here to say that this game is beautiful. It is a miracle that it even exists, and I have so much praise to give it, but it also makes me sad. So let me explain why. Let this video paint the scene of why this game mattered to so many people and the kind of story it left behind. I plan to make a bunch more videos soon that review parts of the game in depth, but for now, I just want to give you some context. Most people watching this probably know about the history of these games, but in case you don't have the full picture, it's important to spend some time going over it. The mainline Tony Hawk series consists of 9 skateboarding games developed by Neversoft and published by Activision. They came out every year for 9 consecutive years between before I was born and after I was born. The Pro Skater games are famous for being addicting to play, but also hard to master and unforgiving. Skateboard tricks are worth points, and performing several tricks adds a multiplier to those points, which is applied to them once you land. Gaps, which are invisible bonuses you score by crossing certain areas in the level, also count as tricks. You only score your points when the combo is finished successfully, so if you mess up even a single trick before landing, all the points go away. The controls are weird, keeping up your speed is this constant push and pull, and tricks are demanding to execute. One mistake can cost you everything, and the major appeal of the game revolves around this intense risk and reward. It's hard to get the hang of, but that's what makes your improvement at it so tangible. You learn to celebrate each small victory like clearing a gap for the first time, nailing a big combo, or getting a high score. It's a lot like the feeling of learning to skate in real life, without feeling like you're actually on a skateboard.
We really stuck with keeping the game true to skating, and I think that was one of the big building blocks of what we ultimately pulled off.
Our goal wasn't to make this mega hit that would define Neversoft. I mean, we were on a mission to just make this small little skateboarding game that would sell a couple 100,000 units and would make its money back, and everybody would be happy, and we could maybe make another one. So our goal was really just to make the best possible skateboarding game that we all enjoyed playing.
Released in 1999, Pro Skater 1 was a massive surprise hit for Neversoft, and once it hit shelves, they immediately began work on a sequel, even asking fans for what they wanted to see in Pro Skater 2. 2 expanded on everything 1 had, with more tricks, a custom level editor, a character creator, a better progression system, etc. It went on to be the single actual most acclaimed PlayStation 1 game of all time, so they probably did something right, and the franchise kept going from there. The Tony Hawk series was never content staying right where it was, and new concepts were always being introduced. In Pro Skater 1, when your wheels touch the ground, you cash out your points and your multiplier resets. In 2, you can continue your combo along the ground using a manual, but they don't work out of vertical ramps, which are your best opportunity for doing big, high-scoring tricks. Then 3 rolls up and gives you the revert, which lets you manual out of vert ramps at the cost of some speed. Just imagine this continuing over many sequels where each one opens up a new avenue for combo extension and raises the skill ceiling of the game. Suddenly you look at Tony Hawk's Underground and it's a very different game. Some would call it easier, more forgiving, but it's also more free-form. Fitting, since individuality is a pillar of skateboarding culture. Some people prefer the simplicity of older games, while the newer games have their charm too, and nobody agrees on which Tony Hawk game is the best one, which is a good thing. My point is that the first two Pro Skater games aren't necessarily what you think of when you talk about Tony Hawk games. The name carries a long and varied legacy. A legacy which is notorious for having a peak, a golden age, then dropping off in quality in the later years. When exactly the game started being bad is also highly subjective, but it was somewhere around, here. Following this decline, the original developers, Neversoft, finished their run of Tony Hawk games in 2007.
I remember Neversoft, the last one we did with Neversoft, Proving Ground. They were going to put my home backyard skate park as a level in whatever we were going to do next. So they came down to my house, took photos of everything. And I remember it was less than a month later, I got a call from Joel at Neversoft and said, look, we don't have the energy, we don't have the excitement. I don't think we're going to do it again. And I understood, you know what I mean? It was disappointing, but it was, we had come so far and we didn't want to keep recycling everything. And it was a risk for them to put all their resources into another game where they're definitely not going to get the same sales.
Then some other, less experienced game studios got their hands on the property. Amidst EA releasing their acclaimed Skate series, which offered a more lifelike take on skateboarding sims, Activision gave us some spin-offs, a notoriously subpar remake of 1 and 2, and a game that called itself Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 without being anything a sequel should be. Even pitted against the lowest point of Neversoft's games, Pro Skater 5 was still a horrendous letdown, a new low for the franchise with bugs, lackluster additions, it didn't feel like Tony Hawk, everything you can think of. By this point, Activision had Neversoft fully merged into Infinity Ward after their work on Call of Duty Ghosts, and the old developers had all either retired or moved on to other projects.
We're thrilled about our merger with Neversoft. The entire team is excited about the future.
So for about 4 years, there was reason to believe that the truly good generation of Tony Hawk games was over for good. It was around October of 2019 when rumors of more Tony started cropping up. Gamers were just coming down from the groundbreaking release of Tony Hawk's Skate Jam on mobile devices when Lizzie Armanto made an appearance on a skateboarding podcast called The 9 Club.
Also, too, you've been immortalized in a video game. You've Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 or something? What was it? Yeah.
And he's coming out with like another one, and I'll be in that too.
Seriously?
Nice.
We talked to him. I need to do some stuff for it.
This part was cut out of the YouTube upload, but you can still find it on podcasting platforms like Amazon. Thought you could hide it from us? A couple of reputable Activision leakers were in agreement and gave similar testimonies at the time, though they were the first to claim that this was a remake of Pro Skater. An Australian punk band called The Death Set also let slip that they were licensing songs out to a new Tony Hawk game on Facebook. Since their music didn't appear in the final game, I can only assume it was used for promotional videos or something. Cool, but considering this is what happened the last time Tony Hawk fans got their hopes up, a lot of us weren't sure what to make of this at all. It was exciting, but it was so easy to get all nihilistic about it. We'd just have to wait until something concrete popped up. And sure enough, on Tony Hawk's birthday, May 12th, 2020, Activision dropped a gorgeous cinematic trailer for Pro Skater 1+2. This trailer is fascinating to me. It was directed very intentionally to imply a whole lot about the game in such little time. Besides just what they advertise on screen like the classic soundtrack, there's a deeper layer to it. Right at the beginning we see Tony do a truck stand, then a 360 finger flip. Ignore that. Remember how I said Pro Skater 3 added reverts? 11 seconds in, Tony does one of those too. They use footage of 1 and 2 for their shot-by-shot comparisons, but they're also hinting that this isn't just going to play like Pro Skater 1 or 2. We've got tricks from THPS 3, THPS 4, and is that supposed to be an acid drop from Underground? Maybe? I don't know. You be the judge. I have a lot more thoughts on this trailer from when it came out, but it's a lot of nerdy stuff that isn't terribly important right now. If you'd like a separate video of me going over all my old fanboy hype, let me know. Amidst the flood of new information alongside the trailer, we found out that this new remake was being made by Vicarious Visions. Who are they?
Vicarious Visions developed Crash Bandicoot!
Oh, they made that. These guys were put up to the Insane trilogy because they had worked on some Crash Bandicoot games on the Game Boy Advance, which were pretty well received and play scarily similarly to the original PS1 games. Wouldn't you know it, VV also made every Game Boy and DS adaptation of the mainline Tony Hawk games, from Pro Skater 2 all the way up to Proving Ground. Everyone I see talk about these games has high praise for them, and they seem really well put together. They're some of the most critically acclaimed games on the GBA, and the DS games don't fare much worse. This is promising, sure, but like, Pro Skater 5 though? After about 15 years without a decent game in the series, Vicarious has to fill some of the biggest shoes in gaming. I mean, can you imagine how much pressure that must be? We kept getting drip-fed information about the game over the following months, and if you weren't a Tony Hawk fan when this was happening, let me tell you, it was wild. The THPS X Discord had a big wishlist channel they were going to send to Activision like some kind of petition. I remember people were asking for stuff like Create a Trick, bringing back Spider-Man, levels from Pro Skater 2X, which is a different remake of the first two games, don't get it confused with Pro Skater HD, DLC for Pro Skater 3 and 4. There was no telling how ambitious this game was actually going to be, so people got wild with their speculation. Anyway, between May and September, we got info and gameplay footage to chew on from the game's previously dormant social media channels. It was revealed that every Pro Skater from 1 and 2 would be returning for the remake, and not as weird, uncanny do-ups of themselves from 1999. We got behind-the-scenes videos showing each of them getting their faces photographed to make their new models. It's really a miracle that not one of these skaters couldn't or didn't want to be a part of this game for one reason or another. After 20 years, they're all still a part of the skate scene and humbled to be a part of it.
It feels good. I'm stoked to be back in the game. It's an interesting way to bring back some nostalgia in skateboarding, and these games were a big part of what happened in skateboarding.
When the first game came out, I was very interested in it. Fast forward years down the road, I see kids doing the exact same tricks that we were doing with our fingers and thumbs on skateboards.
And we got representation of the new generation of skaters too. There's Lizzie Armanto, of course, and Tony Hawk's son Riley amongst the 8 new faces. Bringing new skaters to the game is a great way to mix the old Tony Hawk and the new, getting the modern generation interested in today's skate culture.
I grew up with Tony Hawk Pro Skater. We would play that before we'd go skating. It's really cool that they're showcasing a variety of different skateboarders. You know, like Aori is going to be in it, Leticia, so like highlighting women, and me as like a queer skater I think is really important to like show visibility for that, while also having the original skaters. Like that overlap I think is like very cool.
We got some really nice free cam fly-throughs of the polished up levels that got me so damn excited. School looks so bright and colorful, it's like you can hardly even recognize it. And the hangar is so sleek and shiny, or the ramps, oh my god, they got all the... Oh my god! Oh! The folks at Vicarious Visions were eager to speak up about the game too. The likes of COO Simon Ebejer and Jen Oneal were interviewed to talk about their approach with the game, and what they had to say was promising to say the least.
One of the challenges of doing a faithful remaster is knowing where to push the boundaries and what to keep sacred.
First off, we're fans too. VV has been involved with working on Tony Hawk games for years, starting with many of the Nintendo handhelds, and a number of us have been involved for the lifetime of the series. We had a number of people that came over from Neversoft. Myself, I produced 3 of the games. So approaching this, the number one thing for us was to get it to feel right. It's got to be a high quality game that feels like you remember it.
I would say the basis of it was the feel. Does it feel like it responds the way that the original games did? And that's something that we've been kind of missing through, you know, the various versions and attempts at bringing this back.
He really gets us. We were given the game's final song list on July 29th. The music of the Tony Hawk games is absolutely integral to their identity, and purchasing music rights is notoriously hard, especially for such old songs. But to our surprise, we got nearly all of the original 2 games tracks, plus a whole extra soundtrack's worth of songs from the modern era. Strangely, it all works together pretty well.
We did fall short on a couple of them because, you know, it's 20 years later, and sometimes licensors or copyright holders couldn't be tracked down, or there might have been a dispute as to who might have been the rights holder. But for the most part, when the original artists found out about this game and us remastering it, they were excited to be part of it.
Pre-orderers of the game got their hands on the warehouse demo in August, and there was plenty to like about it. You can hear my real initial thoughts on the demo in this video, but safe to say it made me and other fans very optimistic, even if it was a little bit rough around the edges. This really felt like a Tony Hawk game, more so than any non-Neversoft attempt that came before. And when it finally dropped, this game was a smash hit.
The accessible yet tricky skating is earnest and old school fun. The wonderful looking levels are lovingly designed odes to the past, and the music is like the hearty embrace of an old childhood buddy. It turns out going backwards has been the best step forward Activision has taken with the Tony Hawk series in nearly 15 years.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 both honours the legacy of the original games and updates it in smart ways. What made those first games so special is the care and attention they put into representing skate culture, whether it was the music, the clothing, or the gameplay itself. That's all intact here.
Let's get this straight from the beginning. Pro Skater 1 and 2 is not a replacement for the original two games. It's not trying to be that, and if you expect it to be that, you'll be disappointed. Or pleasantly surprised, depending on who you are. Like I suggested before, it doesn't just have the original movesets. It has tons of tricks from later games that massively expand the combos you can do in these classic levels. Trip branching, spine transfers, hip transfers, reverts, wall plants, acid drops, even rail drop downs and quick turns are here. There are options to disable these new techniques, but it still doesn't feel like the original physics when you do this. It feels more akin to the physics in Pro Skater 3 or 4, and a few gaps from the original levels can't even be done anymore because of this. Does that make it a bad remake? I mean, it doesn't even have Big Drop, the classic Tony Hawk 2 mechanic. No, it's a new attempt at the original games using everything that was learned from making the later games. This mix and match approach to remaking is so refreshing because by celebrating everything the fans love, there's something for everybody no matter which game is your favorite. And we got a game with its own feel, its own personality, and its own identity, instead of just a bundle of pre-existing games with a nicer look. And, you know, those games have their place, but in this case it would have felt like a missed opportunity. An even bigger one than it really is. And when I say this game is a celebration of Tony Hawk, that extends to pretty much everything about it. This game feels like it was made by people who knew why the original games were beloved and were happy to try their hands at adapting the IP. Especially true considering just how well VV nailed the old controls, physics, and feel. Pro Skater 5 this is not, and it's clear that lots of minor things were altered between the trailers and the final game to greatly improve it. Some of the most obscure mechanics and techniques are featured, the kind of thing you wouldn't expect your average remake to include, as well as new features that just elevate the game even more. Getting up from a bale is quicker than ever, for example, and although this rewind effect they use is kinda weird, it's very welcome when you just want to get back to skating and not squirm around on the floor for a few seconds. The actual content of the game is modified as well, like how Pro Skater 1's levels all have 10 goals now instead of the 5 they had before, to match Pro Skater 2's amount of content. This is strictly unfaithful to the originals, but it gives you more stuff to do, and everything that was invented for this game has been really thoughtfully placed to make good use of the level space. Both games' campaigns transfer into one another, making the game feel like less of a collection and more like a complete rebranded package. To top it off, there are 3 different sets of collectibles, with one of each to find in every level, so you can spend a long time exploring parts of levels you might never go during your typical combos, and learn about new shortcuts and pathways in the process. And when you think you're done with the main campaign, 1 and 2 comes with a gigantic list of micro-challenges that award yet more customization items and get you engaging with every system of the game. There are over 700 of these things to complete, and they range from simple tasks like create a character and do a combo with these tricks in them, to the kind of stuff you could spend a whole play session trying to do. With how much there is to unlock, you can start out with like 20 skateboards to choose from, and then hours later end up with more deck graphics than there are skateboarders in the known universe. They also award you with XP and cash to buy yet more cosmetics in the in-game shop. This kind of gameplay loop isn't for everyone, but as someone who loves customizing their character in games, it worked well enough to motivate me for many hours, and it never felt like I was grinding. No, like XP grinding, for God's sake. And these devs know that some dedicated people have gotten really good at these games. Even in the later Tony Hawk games, you wouldn't often need to get scores higher than, say, 1 or 2 million points. And the highest score challenge in the entire series was 5 million in Proving Ground. If you want 100% this game, you'll need double, even quadruple that to achieve every level's secret score. And your reward is these ridiculous board decks that look like portals to the level you just conquered. I love the Roswell one in particular. These are such awesome rewards for mastering the game's levels, and it's great that you really have to work for them. They've also added support for speedrunning with a mode that times you to finish all the goals in a single level, complete with its own par times to reward you with even more stuff. Oh, and even though there's a shop system in the game, there are no actual microtransactions present. You can't spend real cash to beat challenges, give yourself level ups or money. Everything is earned through gameplay. No battle passes or loot boxes or anything. I mean, isn't that just refreshing? Vicarious did end up releasing some DLC packs, but for the first year they were available, one donated 100% of its proceeds to army veterans seeking employment, and the other donated 100% of its proceeds to building skate parks in lesser developed neighborhoods. You can't make this stuff up, these people are saints. And do I need to state the obvious? It is a beautiful game. No Tony Hawk game has ever had this level of fine, crispy detail, and there are so many neat touches to discover within the UI, the animation, the level design, and texturing. It doesn't have the same level of grit you'd expect from your classic Neversoft. There aren't many crude or edgy jokes snuck into the levels, and generally the locales are quite grounded in reality, but there is a sort of PG sense of humor in stuff like these fake movie posters. It's not all just made to look pretty either. There's a sense of purpose and direction to it. Every single level has been reimagined, not just with shinier textures, but each has a distinct story and atmosphere that changes how it feels to skate in them.
I think as an example, like school, right? We're shipping with school 1 from number 1 and school 2 and two school levels, right? So right off the bat, how do we really separate these two? So school 1 is more like elementary school, more vibrant colors, a little bit cleaner. School 2, we're going a little bit more like the original big building was made in the 50s, the annex 60s, the 70s.
I've been blown away. I've played school many times in the franchise, but this school feels very much unique and new while still capturing the essence of what I used to skate 20 years ago.
My favorite in terms of vibes might be the mall. It takes place at midnight because you're trespassing after hours. Like a warehouse in School 2, it's been abandoned, with closing down sale signs everywhere. But it's been reclaimed by the skaters with makeshift ramps and covered from start to finish with incredible wall art. You could say that a powerful theme of this game is the passage of time and how it has affected old familiar locations as much as it has people and culture. Some of the locations these levels were originally based on don't even exist anymore. Love Park in Philadelphia was a legendary skate spot in the 1990s and was remodeled back in 2016 to nowhere near resemble its in-game counterpart. The real-life skate street in Ventura was also shut down at some point, and the developers took the opportunity to imagine what the park would be like today if it was still around.
It's got a really interesting story where one of the owners that made that place, the mom actually made these giant murals that take up most of the level. It's like to find reference of it is pretty tough. So sometimes it's like find little bits of reference, and then the actual original game, because I know that they went there to document what it did look like. So it's cool, like we're looking at the original textures combined with any photo reference we can find, and then it's having, concept artists repaint that entire mural. I mean, that's what I want, is I want someone that's been there to fire it up and feel like, oh my god, like I've been here.
1+2 finds so many ways to honor the series' legacy, as well as the legacy of skateboarding, while still keeping itself rooted in the present day, and that's why it's so much more than just your average remake. There are some weak points, of course. At launch, and indeed still today, there are bugs. Whether they're visual glitches like this, or literally being able to pop through a corner and fall out of bounds. The Tony Hawk games have always been janky, but it's more noticeable under a modern lens. Sometimes collision will be a little weird, a gap point trigger reliably, or the game's sound will bug out a little bit, things like that. Some reviewers mentioned that the challenges were not substantial enough to motivate them to keep playing, which, like I said, it's not for everyone. But others were disappointed with the online mode, calling it an afterthought, and I certainly agree with that. There are two different playlists to queue into, basically framed as casual and competitive, but both just cycle through random levels and random game modes. No spectating when you finish your combo and someone else hasn't, no voice chat, no text chat, you can't even vote for the next level or anything like that. Also, no skill-based matchmaking, so sometimes you'll hop into a game and one person will be stomping everybody else with multiple millions of points, and sometimes you'll be that person. Remember when I was talking about how hard these games are to approach for new players? This game has a decent tutorial that tells you about most of the tricks you can do, not all, mind you, but it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty fundamentals of how to do good combos like you'd expect a decent fighting game tutorial to, for example. And so with these lackluster online features, beginners can't then ask pros for tips or learn by watching them. All they get to do is watch their scores get absurdly high and sit around waiting for them to finish. Huge missed opportunity, especially considering the overwhelming player base this game had at launch, and how solid the online modes were in the PS2 era games. Thug Pro's online beats it for sure, but even Pro Skater 3, the first PS2 game to have internet features, was more robust than this, because it had text chat and an online lobby screen where you could host your own games. And Vicarious Visions made the mistake of tying some in-game challenges to the online modes, but I'll talk about that another time. Creator Park is something I'd like to talk about in greater detail later too, but it's a mode from past games where you could design your own levels with pre-made pieces on a grid. You could take the memory card out of your GameCube or PS2 or whatever and take it to a friend's house so they could play your levels. But nowadays we've got the internet for that. The cap in this game is both better and worse than its predecessors. The new smart objects let you create some ridiculously shaped ramps and rails, the level boundaries are huge and you can make each piece a number of different colors and textures, unlike the past games where pretty much everything was made out of grey concrete. The grid this time around is more of a suggestion than a limitation as well. But this is at the cost of some truly missed features like creating your own gaps to encourage exploration, placing hazards like water and lava to create obstacles. And you can't resize those massive level boundaries besides placing some big, ugly walls to block players in. Snapping pieces together can be temperamental at times too, and the whole thing is just pretty buggy. It's not like this stuff isn't fun to mess around with, and you can make some decent skate parks, but it could really do with some more polish, you know? If you're obsessed with straight edges and symmetry the way I am, some of these tools will drive you insane, especially the smart objects. But if you just want to make weird roller coasters or obstacle courses, you'll probably have a lot of fun. The online browser for levels is lacking in features, and there's also just not enough online activity to go around, which could probably have been remedied if each version of the game shared their servers. PS4 players can't play levels uploaded from the PC or the Xbox, so everything's very fragmented. Again, another detriment to the potential community aspect of this game. But these blows to the game's longevity and accessibility don't take away from the fact that it is immensely fun to play. I still massively recommend it for people trying to step into the Tony Hawk games. It's got a breadth of content to enjoy and unlockables to work towards. Its tutorial is decent for new players, and it distills everything fans like about the series into one enjoyable package. It's a massive love letter to everybody who cared about the classic series, and I couldn't be more happy that it exists. The response to Pro Skater 1 and 2 was hugely positive, and Activision were quick to announce that this was the fastest Tony Hawk game in the entire franchise to sell 1 million units, which spelled incredible news for the future of these games. Alongside all the hype came the promise of post-launch content. Free content updates for non-PC games weren't very common when this series was in its peak, so this was an opportunity that Tony Hawk games hadn't really had before. We could get new levels, new characters, new goals to complete, maybe even new modes. But I better not get ahead of myself. On the 20th of October, about a month and a half after launch, 1+2 added private matches. Before this, those online playlists that just shuffle levels and game modes were the only way to play online, and you couldn't queue up with your friends. Now you can actually skate on your own terms and create custom rooms, as well as use the new party system to join jam and competitive lobbies with friends. Pretty unfortunate that the game didn't release with these features, but cool. The really interesting stuff came around on the 5th of November 2020. We got over 100 new challenges to a new grand total of 820. Some of these are just glorified tutorials, but others are ball-crushingly hard score challenges. There's a decent spread. These were added in response to lots of players complaining about having to grind to reach level 100. So these challenges offer a lot more XP to balance it out a bit and help people get that achievement. Over 100 though, that is a lot of new stuff to try out. There are challenges to go along with the new tour replay mode, which lets you play through the two games as multiple skaters and have separate progress for each one, which is the way the old games used to work. Yeah, before this update, completing goals in career mode would count for all skaters, and there was also no easy way to reset your progress so you could play through it again. This was a nuisance for speedrunners who wanted to run the whole game front to back, and was also just really weird not to have in a Tony Hawk game, where traditionally replaying the game with every character is how you would unlock new stuff. But whatever, it's here now. On top of that, we got new items themed after Crash Bandicoot 4, and 3 contest winners on social media got their skateboard designs added to the game. They're pretty nice designs too. I think they could have done something much more interesting for the Crash items though. All of these can be bought with in-game cash, no paid DLC required, which is again a huge breath of fresh air. All in all, this was a substantial update, and I remember thinking to myself, man, if we keep getting updates like this, I feel like we'll never run out of stuff to do. Only a month after release and we got all this? I remember loving how hard at work Vicarious was with addressing fans' issues with the game, fixing bugs, being so committed to improving their product, and I remember feeling optimistic that more would be coming soon. The future of this game looks so bright. I mean, who knows where it's going to be in a year at this rate?
Activision Blizzard has moved its Vicarious Visions studio from the Activision side of the business to the Blizzard side. Going forward, the Vicarious Visions team of about 200 people will be employees of Blizzard and fully dedicated to existing Blizzard games and initiatives, which means the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 studio will no longer be creating games as the lead developer.
The future that we have at Blizzard is so bright, and I'm just stoked, frankly, to be part of this next chapter of Vicarious Visions' story, and I'm humbled and honored to have the opportunity to be the studio head of the company during this time. I'm just super excited. Vicarious Visions will keep its name.
Our team at VV is made up of roughly 200 talented developers who love Blizzard's games and have always viewed them as an inspiration. Anytime we think about the kind of developer we want to be and the level of skill and capability that we want to achieve, we point to Blizzard. In particular, we've always admired the amazing community surrounding Blizzard's games and the ways Blizzard has expressed great care for their players, from BlizzCon to their gameplay-first approach. At VV, we are excited for the opportunity to serve that passionate community with epic games for years to come.
In an announcement that probably took VV by surprise as much as it did us, Activision had them fully merged into Blizzard Studios after their work on the Diablo 2 remaster, and the developers were forced to move on to other projects. Sounds familiar, right? Instead of developing solo, now they would get to assist working on the likes of Diablo 4. Then, a year later, on April 12th, they were renamed to Blizzard Albany. I'm not about to assume how the Vicarious Visions team felt about this merger, but I sure know how I felt about it. For months we were all left thinking, is that just it? The social media accounts continued to post like nothing had happened, and soon we had next-gen versions announced and released in February and March, then a Switch version arrived in June. The game's servers had been behaving strangely around this time too. People were failing to connect online whether on PC or console, and found they had to use the Wi-Fi hotspot on their phone just to queue for a game. Activision's server status page reported no issues, and attempts to reach out were met with complete silence. The community was becoming even more fragmented. What else could we do now except wait and see what was next? I mean, we were still getting the occasional event and live stream. Even Tony Hawk was playing the game from time to time on various live streams, like on, let's say, June 21st, 2022.
I wish I could say that we had something in the works, but, Vicarious Visions kind of got disbanded, and
True.
Activision's going through all their stuff, so I don't know what's next.
Yeah, dude. If there's a 3 and 4 or whatever, you know how to reach me.
I mean, that was the plan. Even up until the release date of this, we were going 3 and 4.
Yep.
And then Vicarious got kind of absorbed, and then they were looking for other developers, and then it was over. The truth of it is that they were trying to find someone to do 3 and 4, but they just didn't really trust anyone the way they did Vicarious. So they took other pitches from other studios, like what would you do with the THPS title, and they didn't like anything they heard, and then that was it. I wish there was some way to bring it back. I mean, who knows? Maybe when all the dust settles, we'll figure it out.
You never know, Tony. You never know.
You never know. I would never imagine that we were going to do 1 and 2 20 years later. So
same. I didn't spill the beans. Let it be known.
The game finally came to Steam in 2023 after being exclusive to the Epic Games Store for 3 years. I assume their exclusivity contract ran out. This port was handled by Iron Galaxy, who handle a lot of porting games to other platforms, but will occasionally come out with an amazing game like Rumbleverse. Don't know why I had to bring that up anyway. They actually fixed the online servers for this release, though all the releases of the game still don't work to this day. Despite that, the servers are nearly always empty nowadays. Sometimes the occasional new player or pro will wander into a match with you, but it's unlikely you'll fill a whole 8-player lobby unless it's at peak hours. Don't get me wrong, a game like this was never meant to last forever, but I think it was cut down in its prime because of the unfortunate timing of this merger. It could have received more content for years to come, knowing how passionate and dedicated Vicarious Visions was to their product, and to the original series. It's depressing to see Pro Skater 1 and 2 in a state where it could be so much more, but you know that it never will. Where are we now then? Well, Activision was bought by Microsoft in 2022, so they're the ones with the rights to the games now, but since that's happened, there's been no news of future plans with Tony Hawk. When the dust settles, yeah, maybe some other miracle team with decades of expertise making great skateboarding games could come along and pick up where 1 and 2 left off. But Vicarious Visions were the one, you know? If anyone was the one, it was them. It's just tragic to have had such awesome talent put to waste for the second time now. It feels hopeless, like when Pro Skater 5 came out all over again. Well, we can always count on the community. Modding for 1 and 2 isn't terribly easy right now, but there is a fan project that's set out to remake every level from 3, 4, Underground, and more in the new engine called THPS Pro. It also adds a few characters and creator skater items, fun extras like a free cam, more cheats, debug menus, stuff like that. Currently the creators are working to add the original game's goals, a working online mode, and working gaps, and it's being updated pretty damn frequently. I think this mod could really turn into something on the same level as Thug Pro and breathe new life into the community if it keeps getting supported. People are always going to find a way to keep this game and this franchise alive, even if everything seems to be against us here. And really, I do recommend this game still, even as it is. Grab it on sale for like $15 and have a good time, whether you want to speedrun, 100%, make custom parks, or play with your friends. If you're going to play it as a first timer, I recommend these 2 videos by AndyTHPS when you've gone through the basic tutorial to fill in the gaps on how you can level up your combos. And even if this game's official lifespan is seemingly over, it's important to celebrate it as it is now and not just get down about what it could have been. I'm going to give Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 12 a deep, impassioned analysis in some future videos, and really pick apart the things I love and loathe, but mostly love about it. The fact is, I've never really cared about a single game's lifespan as much as this one's before, and I hope by now I've given a decent explanation as to why. Stay tuned for more. Hopefully it'll take me less than an entire year to get back to you this time, but no promises. Wait, never mind, wait. Tony, what is this? Tony?
You got the 25th anniversary coming up of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. What's next for the franchise?
I wish I could tell you more, but I can't tell you that I have been talking to Activision again, which is insanely exciting.
Get out of town. The boys are back.
We're working on something.
Can you give me
This is the first time I've said that publicly. But I think it will be something the fans will truly appreciate.
Tony, what do you mean, Tony? You can't just say things like this, Tony!